Dr. Brackett is from Yale University, and he directs the Center for Emotional Intelligence there. Since the previous director of that program is now the president, correct?
Sort of like that.
Kind of close. Yeah. You never know where he'll land next. So we are very happy to have him here, and I would like you to give him a warm welcome this morning.
All right, let me turn this mic on. It's a little soft-spoken. Oh, that's good. Can you all hear me all right? Sure. Sounds good? All right. So, Keith, thank you for the introduction. I'm not sure if it was warm or not. And I have to get my head together. I've been traveling. I was in Hong Kong this week, and then I went home for 2 days, and I'm here. So if I look a little delirious, it's because I actually am. But since I've got good strategies to regulate my feelings, and I find it's not good. I can fake it until I make it. I think I'll be okay. But so what I thought would be useful for all of you today is, A, you should know what's going on in that room, right? Because these are your teachers and principals, I guess, who are doing this work or who are being trained on how to implement Ruler in the school. And I'll just start by giving you a little bit of anecdotal work. So I started my career literally when I was 12 years old, because I was a kid who hated school, and I was a failing student. And I was bullied horrifically in school. I just couldn't really fit in. I didn't really know who I was, and I didn't, I had just tons of anxiety, and we had family problems, and the list goes on. And I was now, in retrospect, I think, how is it possible that none of the adults who were raising me and teaching me, knew that I was so unhappy, or that I was so anxious, and why did people ask me interesting questions about who I was and what was going on in my life? And I think there's tons of reasons for that, which I'll cover a bit today. But there was one human being who was my savior, and he was my uncle. And good old Uncle Marvin happened to be a middle school teacher in upstate New York. And Marvin taught social studies, and he was also, by night, he was a trumpet player, he was a band leader, and he was just cool. And when I was in my teenage years, Uncle Marvin happened to be going to graduate school in New Jersey, where I was growing up. He'd come down on the weekends to take his courses and stay with our family. Lo and behold, in the summers, Uncle Marvin and I would sit in the backyard, and we'd have these really deep conversations. And the one thing he did to me, which was interesting, is when he was in grad school, he had to learn how to deliver IQ tests. Now, I was a C&D student, so then he tested me on my IQ. And he's like, Mark, this doesn't make much sense here. You did so well on this test, but you're not doing well in school. What's going on? And then all of a sudden, the torrent came, and I shared with him all the things that I was suffering and scared about, and blah blah blah. And lo and behold, in addition to him testing me on my intelligence and me having some affirmation that I wasn't, unintelligent, he was also writing a curriculum called Little People's Feelings. And what he did was, he was an maverick in the education system back then, and he took the social studies required curriculum, and he said, I don't understand this. My students he lived in farming country, so he said they're milking cows in the morning, they're coming into school, and I'm getting there, and I'm trying to get them to memorize the Roman oligarchy, and it's just what does this have to do with their lives? They could care less, and they're like, and he said when I'm in, at night when I'm at the hotels playing my trumpet, everybody's like, and then I go, why is it? And he said because there's no feeling in education, there's no feeling in the content. So he started writing a curriculum where we took every chapter of the social studies textbook, and he wrote down what are the emotional themes that are happening for the characters, whether it be in the Holocaust or the Roman Holocaust, whatever it was. He would say, what's the core kind of emotional piece that's going on here? Alienation, elation, etc. And he started writing a curriculum. Anyhow, when I was with him in the summers, he would literally have me type up his notes. And have conversations about these words. I truly believe that was how, the reason why I'm here today. Because I did do a little better in middle school and high school. I went to college, still wasn't 100% in the best place psychologically. And then I found myself in therapy. I'm like, you gotta figure this stuff out, Mark. And now I'm in therapy in my early 20s, and I am reading self-help books, motivation and this and that. And I come across some books, and I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what Uncle Marvin did with me as a kid. And Uncle Marvin at this point in time in his life is retired, living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, like all teachers from the Northeast. And so I call my Uncle Marvin, who's now basically sitting in Dunkin' Donuts all day drinking decaf. And I'd say, like, I think that what you did for all these years is really like a thing now, and it might even be called social and emotional learning. And so we took him out of retirement and we wrote a book together called Emotional Literacy in the Middle School, which I hope none of you ever purchased. It's still in print for some, I don't know what reason. We wrote it 20 years ago now. It took 10 years to get published because nobody wanted to touch it. And it was my first kind of entree into this space because I was a struggling middle schooler, as a kid. Didn't know anything about emotional intelligence. And then Uncle Marvin was a practitioner. He was doing this for 30 years. So I said, let's put the science and practice together and try to create this program. And I tell you this background story because we failed horrifically, like terrible. Because Uncle Marvin was like the Robin Williams character in Dead Poets Society, if you saw that movie. He could do anything. He'd come in as a pharaoh. He was just an amazing teacher. And what we found as we tried to roll out our Feeling Words curriculum, as we called it then, was that so here's what would happen. I'll give you an example. Like right now, one of you would stand up. This would literally happen in our training. Someone would stand up at this point in my little opening spiel and say something like the following. My job is not to talk to my students about my feelings. You're like, okay. Thank you for the invitation. And that was at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was in London doing a training, like, shit, I'm going to go 6 hours. Like, what am I going to do? And then we get teachers, and then I even, like, my background is I became a martial arts instructor as well. So I had this martial arts studio, and all the kids, had kids, and their parents were teachers and principals of schools. That was the way I got into schools, because they trusted me as their karate teacher. I'm like, can I come do a free workshop at your school about emotions? Yeah, sure, you know we want Mark. Anyhow, we'd go into these schools and do workshops, and then teachers would think, well, this is interesting, but I'm not going to do the word despair, or anxious, or, overwhelmed. I'll do joy, jolly, cheerful, connected, supported, loyal. They want to do only the positive words. And I'm like, but that's not the human condition, right? Like, everybody has this full range of feelings, and I was the one who, the reason nobody ever talked to me about my negative emotions. So essentially what I'm saying is that we had tons of barriers to getting this work into schools. And at that point in time, this is 20 years ago or so, 18 years ago, I realized very quickly that it had nothing to do with the kids. That we spent all these years writing classroom content, but really it's about the adults teaching kids. And then it's about the principals who are leading schools and the superintendents who are running the districts. Because once we got the teachers on our bus, they would do amazing work in the classroom, but it took so much time to get the teachers to believe that this was valuable information because they hadn't had it in their own education. Even now, still today, I teach at Yale, it's a pretty good place. And I don't really relate well to my environment because I grew up in a blue collar, I was an air conditioning repairman, and I grew up not having resources. And now my students are like, my father's a senator and my mother is a famous actress, and it doesn't really matter what happens. And I'm like, well, and so I teach this course on emotional intelligence for college students. And essentially, like the second week of class, they think they're coming there to memorize the theories. I don't care about theories. Like, I know them, and you'll know a little bit about them, but theory doesn't change life, right? Like, skills change life. And culture and climate changes people's experiences. So they come in thinking they're going to memorize the theories and all this kind of stuff. And then they realize that my class is all about personal development. And they get angry. I'm not kidding. They get angry at me. They say things like, I didn't need emotional intelligence to get into Yale. And I say, well, you need to get out. And because nobody's going to hire someone with that personality disorder. And it's just incredible to me, you know, how people don't necessarily yet see how valuable these skills are. And what I can tell you is that they are what differentiates the people who really are healthy, happy, and effective in life and the people who aren't. So, with that said, I'm not going to spend an enormous amount of time on the history of SEL, because I just don't think it's necessary. You can read about it. Somehow or another, my screen is that had weight loss surgery. Had a laparoscopic surgery here. It's been crushed, so the fonts look a little weird, but you can still read it. So, in addition to my role at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, I'm also a board member of CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And this is the larger framework, you know, that has come out. Earlier on in the SEL space, back when CASEL was founded, it was very program focused, right? It was like, there were boxes basically that you would buy and kits. And then you give that kit to the teacher and you say, here you go, do this lesson on empathy. Like one lesson a year on empathy, which is like really weird when you think about it. Or do this lesson on conflict resolution. I statements. Everyone familiar with I statements? Right, like a lesson on I statements is weird. I'll be honest with you, it's weird, I'm just telling you. It's like you have one lesson to say, I feel angry when you blank. However, I was just in a school, this is the best. This one principal was Brett, she said, Mark, you have no idea. The implementation, not of our work, but of SEL in our school is, we do everything. Mindsets, restorative justice, we do SEL, we do breathing, we do this, we do building this. And it was like a list of 25 things. So I'm walking in the hallway with this principal and as a teacher using the I statement with her student. But unfortunately, it looks something like this. When you see that way, I feel angry. And so the principal, she was a little bit mortified in that moment. And I was like, oh, I see the great training in I statement. Right? So it's not the I statement training, right? We know that's the least of your problems. Like, first, it's so artificial in many ways. But secondly, is that unless you understand the role of emotions in learning and judgment and decision making, right? Like the phrase has no meaning. Right? It doesn't matter. It's how you deliver it. Right? It's how you connect with people that really is what we're looking for in this work. So we started off with programs, then realized it's about practices, then realized it's about infusing it into instruction, then realizing it's about adult modeling, and then realizing it's about systemic policy work at a school level. So for example, and this happened to me years ago, like a high school in New York City. So we trained some of the teachers, but like the dean of the school, who would be like the disciplinary person, wasn't trained. So the kid would be in classroom, they'd get through all this instruction, and then say something happened, they got into a fight in phys ed, they get sent down to the dean didn't have training, you're out. So there's no consistency, right, from classroom to support behavior support systems. So now we think about it as being much more holistic in nature. I also had the privilege of being a commissioner on what was called the National Commission for Social, Emotional, and Academic Development. And the commission launched a report in January. I'm not sure if you read it or not. It's downloadable. It is a very comprehensive report on the state of social emotional learning. It was under the auspices of the Aspen Institute. And just amazing people were on this commission. It was a team of 60 scientists, a team of 60 superintendents, principals, and teachers, and a team of 60 or so policymakers. So from former governors to people who work in Washington, all coming together to talk about the science, the practice, and the policies in the space. And I think it really is going to have impact. because as you can see here, it's like what it says, the promotion of social and emotional mobility is not a shifting educational fad, it's substantive education itself. And that's what we're really aiming for in this work. Finally, for my brief intro, people want this. Like, it's just more and more people are realizing that this is what's necessary to create a healthier world, to create a better workplace. I was part of a study by McKinsey and Microsoft that asked 2,000 employers across the United States, what skills are you looking for? And they were just writing out the skills. And about 40% of the skills that employers say they're looking for are these non-academic skills. And then we asked them, well, what percentage of the people you're hiring now do you believe have these skills? And that was down to as low as 40% as well. So you can see there's an increase in what people are wanting, but they're not yet receiving. And I interviewed people for my own book, which is coming out very soon, like at Rand and others. And I remember this guy who was the vice president of Rand, which is a consulting firm you may have heard of. He said to me, Mark, like the MIT, the Stanford, the Yale, blah, 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 like they all know a lot, but like God, they're terrible at team meetings. When people disagree with them, they're so arrogant. You know, their presentations are so freaking boring. But you see what I'm getting at? They have all the academic skills, but yet none of the social and emotional. All right, ready to rock and roll? Here we go. Here's your first tool. And if I get my way today, you will all run out of here and get a tattoo of the movie there. The only thing that gives me joy in life these days. So this is the tool that will change your life. And I say that because it's deceptively simple. So the mood meter is our tool for building emotional self-awareness, for understanding how emotions influence all aspects of our life. On the x-axis, it says the word pleasantness. All of you are feeling some degree of pleasantness this morning. You woke up, like I did. I'm staying in a great hotel, by the way. I stayed in Portland last night. And I woke up, tired. But then I was anticipating, because I'm a coffee freak. And I'm like, I'm in Portland, Oregon. There better be really good coffee. I give it a B+. Sad.
Where'd you go?
I'll talk about that on break. So, when I go back later on, I'm like desperate. So -5 would mean that you woke up this morning thinking to yourself, I cannot believe I'm going to have to listen to this guy from Connecticut talk about feelings for 3 hours. What is wrong with me? That would be here. That would be unpleasant. Maybe you're thinking unpleasant thoughts. Maybe it's like, I don't know, I could listen to Mark, I could listen to my husband and wife, I could be at school, it's all the same. That would be like everyday unhappiness, as Freud hoped for some people. Maybe you're neutral. Maybe you're thinking, oh my goodness, 3 hours talking about feelings. Or maybe you're at +5 in pleasantness, like there are no words. It's like the ineffable experience. So please give yourself right now a number that gives you information about here. It's really the cognitive piece. So is your brain saying to yourself something like, I want to approach this training, or I don't know, this is for me. I feel engaged, I feel disengaged. I feel comfortable, I feel uncomfortable. What's your number on the x-axis? You have to show you. On the y-axis, it says energy. Just what we're sharing. Energy has to do with your level of activation. So does your body and mind feel alert, alive, like it's going to thrive? Or does your body and mind feel more depleted, resourceless? So what's your body telling you right now? Is it saying, I'd like to disappear and go back to bed and pull the covers over my head? Or is it saying, I can take over the world? What is your body telling you right now? And of course, what we do is we take our two axes and we cross them to create the four quadrants, the yellow, the red, the blue, the green. So yellow are high energy and pleasant emotions. Raise your hand if you're in the yellow this morning. About 85% of the room is in the yellow. Okay. Green, you're pleasant, but your energy is kind of low. Okay, I think that brings us to 100%. So no one in Willamette, did I say it right? Oh. It's like I have a disorder about this place, because I like, every time I say it, so it's Willamette. All right, I have to engrave that, or I have to do something. No one here is in the red or the blue, which is amazing, likely untrue. But we'll get to that detail later. What I'd like you to do right now is convert your color to a word. What is the feeling word that you would use to best describe how you're doing right now? You have 3, 2, 1, freeze. Let me get an honest raise of hands here. How many of you had some trouble finding the precise word? Hands up. Hands up high. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, about 25. So about 2/3 of the room. So here we are in a room filled with highly educated administrators, am I right? All of you are on leadership positions, and you're emotionally illiterate. It's a great start. So here's what I'd like to do. After table groups, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. All of you are now researchers. You're now research assistants. I'll even promote you to postdoc or fellows at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And what I'd like you to do is come up with 3 hypotheses. Why would it be that people in this room who are pretty educated, who are asked to come up with a word to describe their feelings, are struggle to find that word? Questions? All right, you got 3 minutes for 3 hypotheses. Go to work.
I was going to say that's my intention. We always want to check in the beginning. Not always, but a lot. And then we want to check in. So I feel like it's conditioned us a little bit to think of a word. Now that makes sense.
We don't like to
I think yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Especially in your position. You see that. I feel like we like I was able to think more about it. Oh, I'm thinking one word can never really describe there's so many feelings going on. So my one, you know what I mean? Like maybe I'm tired and I'm not excited about today, but I just didn't get enough sleep. You know what I mean? That would be a yeah. So it's like, you know, my daughter was
Let's come back together, please.
What's your favorite movie?
Everyone's my hand in the air. So we use this as our little signal coming back together. All right, who's got a hypothesis? You guys finished early, I noticed.
Yes.
All right, so what's your hypothesis?
We had 3 different points of view.
Great, love it. Any of them?
One of them was not enough energy to come up with a word.
All right. So one of them is like, I just don't have the energy, right? And that's true, right? You're tired, right? You can't think right now, I just need to go to bed. So maybe that is the issue. So, good point. Another one?
Somebody wanted more than one word.
All right, who was that? No, I didn't hear one.
I couldn't find the right word to
Couldn't find the right word?
adequately describe exactly how I was feeling.
Uh-huh.
It's like happy wasn't good enough.
Yeah, too easy to
But-
say that.
Right.
Happy.
Yeah. But I'm more than happy, but I couldn't.
You're more than happy.
Yeah,
So
but
is there a word that describes more than happy?
well,
Elated, ecstatic, jubilant.
yeah, but I wasn't any of those.
So maybe you're less than happy.
Happy, but not, yeah.
So content, tranquil, peaceful, relaxed, serene.
Maybe, yeah. I just couldn't just
I know these words, but. All right, so you wanted more than one word. Sometimes where energy's too low, it's like, I can't think about it, just leave me alone, I want to go to bed. Other hypotheses in the room.
Not taught to connect feelings to words.
Not taught to connect feelings to words, great point. So we don't, how much formal education do we get in connecting our inner experience to our language? It's interesting, I know that you have good wines here, just because the hotel and thing said, it was the weirdest thing, I was checking in, she's like, we have a special thing on our thing, I don't know what it was, I couldn't follow, I was too tired. But she was, you can do pour in your room, but they're $150 bottles of wine, so it's like, it makes it a good deal. It's like, that sounds like an interesting deal. But I bring that up because I did a talk in Napa a couple of years ago, and I was with all these men and women who sell wine, expensive wines, and I did the same exercise, couldn't come up with a word. So I said, I want you to describe your best red. I can't tell you how eloquent, right? Dark, tannins with rich, lush, crushed hair extract. And there's an articulate words and metaphors that I've never heard of before, but yet, how you feeling? I don't know. So you're right, we may not spend time developing the language for this. What else?
So we may have that language, but we don't apply it to our professional or work lives.
Tell me more.
I could explain to you how I felt yesterday at noon pretty easily,
Yeah?
but it's a little.
Because you're at home,
Because I'm
family.
at home and because that's
Yeah.
a place where we have feelings, but we don't have feelings in our work lives, we're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And so it may be hard to come up with the words.
Great. Well, not great, but. So what you're saying is that there are rules around emotions in the workplace. And we create those rules, by the way. They're not, they were created because their rules are not the same in every workplace or every classroom or every school. But yes, you're correct. Maybe, feelings are for your personal life. I was giving this talk in New York City, and this one woman said to me, my boss said, it doesn't matter how you feel. She said, I'll say it to you. He said, I don't really care how you feel because you represent me. And I was like, ooh, how many of you want to wake up in the morning and go to that workplace? So feelings are always there, whether you want to name them or not. They're there for every activity we do, but yet we create rules around whether or not it's safe to express those feelings or not. Other hypotheses?
Fear.
Fear of
Being judged.
being judged. So if you're not feeling happy, everything else goes bad, right? So ask me how I'm feeling.
How are you feeling?
Fabulous. Yeah, ask me again.
How are you feeling?
Despondent. She's like, hey. I got work to do. I don't know how to deal with your despondent.
I'm sorry we didn't get you the coffee you wanted.
You should be
We have a
apologizing.
EAP program you can access here. Call this number.
There you go. Wow, see that? It's like, go there and get your feelings dealt with. Even though you have to spend 6-7 hours a day here. So you can see right away that there are things that and these are all implicit within us, whether it be not having been taught, whether not having to work, whether it be physical states influencing it, or whether it be the rules around, is it appropriate, am I going to be judged or not? And we wonder why the anxiety levels in our country are the highest they've been ever. I can share with you the data in 12 universities across the state of Connecticut, because I've been studying them. every year for the last 6 years, there's been a 20% increase in students seeking mental health treatment in their freshman year. So it is crazy. About 50% on average of undergraduates are asking for treatment and support for their anxiety, depression, or substance abuse in their first year of college. Something's wrong. That's a little, 10% understandable, 15% maybe, 50% ridiculous. Okay, how are we doing?
Great.
How are we feeling so far? Yes? Are you here with me?
Yes.
All right. So my goal, by the way, is for this couple hours that I have with you, is to keep you in the +2 range for as long as possible. Now that is not realistic every day. It's just not. You can't always be happy. That's an unrealistic goal. It's just crazy. Life is filled with ups and downs and ins and outs. Yet, we do have this implicit message in our culture that it's got to be about happy. And I can't tell you as much training I do on this mood meter tool, every teacher secretly just wants their kids to be in the yellow. Because then she or he doesn't have to do anything. Because when kids are happy, it means that I am free from dealing with feelings. That's just not the way the world operates. You'll see why in a moment. But for a training, it's a good place to be. So that leads to the second big question. What's your strategy? And I see we speak Spanish a lot in this district. So, ¿cuál es tu estrategia? So what is your strategy for dealing with your feelings today? If you're in the yellow, what are you going to do to stay there for the next till 12 o'clock? Until we have our pork with gluten-free buns. Thank you very much for whoever planned that. If you are in the blue, or you anticipate that by 11:30 you're going to get a little low energy from sitting and listening to this guy for too long, what are you going to do to keep your energy up? If you're too excited, like, I can't wait to do this, I can't wait to do this, I can't wait to do this, like you're hyper, what's your strategy for, calming down? So take a moment and think about that. So let's imagine a preschooler, a third grader, an 8th grader, or a 10th grader. I don't really care. Ready? I'm now your substitute teacher, Mark. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark. I know that your school has adopted ruler and you use tools like the mood meter to check in the morning. So I'm going to ask us all to take a moment and check in. How are you feeling this morning? Wow, we've got yellow, red, blue, green in a row. Okay. Well, let me share with you some strategies, because today, we're in 8th grade, we're going to be focusing on nonviolent resistance in our social studies class. And so while we're doing all that learning about nonviolent resistance, what I'd like you to do is stay engaged. Because why not? And if that's troubling for you, just find the reason why you're here. And if that doesn't work, what I'd like you to do is stand up and take a break. And if that doesn't work, I want you to ask questions. Or what you can do is just think about how this applies to your personal and your professional development. Maybe you can do that with me. Think about what's in it for you. Grab some water. Take good notes. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to give you a sweater. You can pretend your sweater's giving you a hug, so you feel safe, comfortable, and warm. Okay? Ready to move forward? Okay. Without judgment, I'm going to ask you to go back to your table groups for the next 3 minutes. What do you think works or doesn't work about these strategies for the students in your districts? Go ahead. Okay, let's come back in 10 seconds. So what do you think about these strategies? What came up for you in your conversations around the helpfulness, unhelpfulness of these strategies? Yeah.
For many students, it'd be difficult to access those strategies. It wouldn't be realistic.
It's not realistic to just say stay engaged. It doesn't have any meaning really. It's like stay engaged in what? How? What else? interesting point. So we may not be allowed to just stand up whenever we want to stand up and stretch whenever we want to stretch, or go leave the room to get a glass of water when we want. I was doing a training for a bunch of high school educators in Connecticut. 20 high schools joined our team, joined our work. And these were interesting high schools. I should say that because the first strategy that one of the teachers in the room said, he goes, I'm going to stare at the clock all day. And then the next teacher said, I'm going to sneak out the vodka in my coffee. And the next one said, I'm just going to think about my dog. I was like, what has happened to my life? This is what I do for a living. Like, this is like unbelievable. And anyway, I pushed these, because there were high school educators sometimes take resistance to this work. I have zero tolerance and patience for people like that. So I just turn it right back at them, so that's what you're presenting to your students, right? That you're going to recommend your students to drink vodka and stare at the clock in your class. Is that what you really want? So we have to evaluate these strategies, right? Are they helpful? Are they unhelpful? Do they help us to achieve well-being? Do they help us to be engaged and focused? Or do they not? What else came up about the strategies?
So they seem like a lot of states of mind
Uh-huh.
that could be very hard for kids to access, and they weren't actions. But some of them weren't actions,
Sure.
or they weren't it wasn't clear how a student would enact it.
Great point. So it's like, people always say, just be present.
Okay.
Okay, like, tell me what do I gotta do? Like, how do I actually hate this class, so being present is like the worst thing in my possible repertoire. Think about that. So there's another piece of this, which is development. That we have to scaffold these strategies across children's development. You can't ask a 5-year-old to, engage in a reappraisal strategy, right? Think about how this is going to relate to your personal and professional success. Like a little bit weird. Like, I don't even know why I'm sitting in this class. Why am I learning this? So the reason why I bring this up front is to just kind of saturate you with the idea that this is a complex phenomenon. That we can't, there's no little box of kit that you put into a classroom that is going to support children across their development in learning these skills and strategies. It's just got to become a way of being within school. It's got to be developmental, it's got to be scaffolded, and I ask you right now to think about, you've all visited schools and sat in faculty meetings and run Ph.D.s for teachers. How many of the adults who are teaching kids in your schools do you believe have pockets full of developmentally appropriate, helpful emotion regulation strategies to support children across their development? And it's not like I'm not trying to say it's judgmental. I'm just saying it just hasn't been part of their training. Like, I didn't know this stuff until I was in graduate school. Like, I never heard of the concept emotion regulation. So nevertheless, how would I even know what the strategies are? Interestingly enough, even when you go for most therapies, like what I learned in therapy was, I could tell you unbelievable stories about my mother. Like, unbelievable, why my mother is responsible for my neuroses and these fantasies that I conjured up in my mind about my childhood has not helped me one bit in with my anxiety or my fears or my self-esteem. Right? You need skills and strategies, no matter what. Everybody has the right and needs to learn them. All right, let's all stand. We're going to movement journey. We're going to just roll our shoulders out a little bit if you're comfortable doing this. And roll them forward. Oh, let's roll our necks a little bit if you're comfortable doing that. Don't do too fast because I don't think it hurts. Other direction. All right, let's grab our hands, stretch out the hands a little tight. Go a little, make your jacket on. My point was that, as I said earlier, this is a deceptively simple tool. Like, we just think about these 4 colors, and then we start to explore how are we feeling, what are our strategies. And you can imagine that each quadrant has a different set of strategies. Think about that, like what I need to get into the yellow, like when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I gotta go talk to more school administrators about ruler. which I never do, by the way. Well, that's a lie, but I do. There are days that I don't want to do my work. Does anyone ever have that feeling? Come on, let's be real. There are days that I would like to sit in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, and like think instead of do. But I have to do. So the question is, what's my strategy for getting the right frame of mind for being the best possible trainer? I didn't touch it just so you know. You think it's that too? Wow. This is too sensitive. Remember there's something about being too sensitive. I may not even need it. I may just take it off. Just 'cause can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, good. And now we're going to get more granular. So I'd like you to take a moment and please sit up straight in your seats. Good posture. And some of you I know, one of the strategies that you did not come up with, by the way, this morning, which I'm going to highly recommend, is turning your phones over or putting them away. I'm imposing a strategy. Because you all are addicted like our kids are addicted to their phones. On average, adolescents today spend 6 hours a day on their cell phones. And we wonder why they're disconnected. Yes?
May I take notes on that's the only thing I've been doing.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
But I'm going to like go into your app and
You're
see the
welcome to
usage
look.
while you're as long as I'm not on Facebook. So, please get good posture in your seats. And we're going to do a little bit of a meditation. Not a religious one, just a reflection. Take a nice long inhale, please. And a nice long exhale. I'm going to ask you right now to identify one child that you know. It could be your own child. It could be a student in your school. It doesn't matter. Just identify that child. And for the next 1 minute, I'm going to ask you to be that child, actually. So I'm going to ask you to live vicariously through that child. Hear me out. This is a silent kind of reflection. It is, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. You're waking up as this child. How do you feel? Do you wake up saying, this is going to be the best day of my life? I feel loved and supported and valued and appreciated. Or do you say, ugh. All right, it's breakfast time. What is breakfast like for you as this child? Is it an easy breakfast? Is it a difficult breakfast? Is it comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? Are you even eating? Are you rushing? You're commuting to school, potentially. How is your commute? Is it an easy one or a difficult one? Do you feel safe? Do you have friends? Are you lonely? You enter your school building and you look around the hallways. How do you feel? Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, science, math, language arts, phys ed, art, whatever it might be. How are you feeling as a student navigating Class 1, 2, 3? Or if you're in a preschool, just the first couple hours in the morning. It's lunchtime. How are you feeling? What are you doing? It's after lunch. You have more classes to attend. Tests, no tests. How are you feeling? It's 2 o'clock, it's 3 o'clock, your last few classes of the day. How are you feeling? What emotions are you experiencing at the end of the school day when you're walking out of the doors of your school building? Do you say, thank God it's over? Do you say, can't wait to come back? Are you anticipating going home to a crazy house? Are you afraid about the after-school program you're going to? Are you excited about the tutor you're going to see? Are you eager to play your instrument? How are you feeling? It's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Where are you? Are you home yet? If you're home, how are you feeling at home now? Who's there with you? It's dinner time. What's that experience like in your household? Are you feeling supported and connected? Are you having rich conversations about the day? Are you being yelled at? Are you eating alone? What's your story at the end of the day? 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, what are you doing? Where are you? What are you doing? 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, are you already asleep? Imagine you as this child getting into bed and putting your head on your pillow. What's going on in your mind as you fall asleep at night? How are you feeling? So we went around in groups earlier. Now I'm going to ask you to partner up. So if you're in 2 or 3 groups 2 or 3, I want you to spend about 2 minutes just sharing what came to mind and what you saw in that reflection. Go ahead. Okay, everybody, let's come back together. So I'm going to ask you now, we're going to go around the room, and you get one word to describe what you noticed. So summarize that roller coaster ride that you went on as that student, and what's the one word that you would use to describe the emotional life that you witnessed of that child? And we'll start right there, and we'll just go around. Sir?
Anxious.
Anxious.
Pressure.
Pressure.
Emotional.
Emotional.
Trying to fit in.
Trying to fit in.
I have pressure as well.
Pressure.
Busy.
Busy.
Chaotic.
Chaotic. Boundaries.
Anxiety.
Anxiety.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet.
Happy.
Happy.
Big swings.
Swings.
Depression hidden as happiness.
Depression hidden as happiness.
Exhausting.
Exhausting.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Anxious.
Anxious. Content. Antsy. I'm sorry? Unseen. Sorry.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
Anxious.
Anxious. Love. Anxious. Angry. Depressed. Got everybody? So probably if we were to do an analysis of the pleasant to unpleasant emotions, I think there were 2 or 3 people who mentioned positive things. And I didn't ask you even to think about a troubled child. I just said, think about any kid. So lots of things we can unpack there. But what I thought I would show you right now is what the national research shows. So I have had the privilege of running studies over the last 20 years of my career. And this is one of the biggest I've done. It's with 22,000 high school students across the nation. And that's what they told us. The top 3 feelings they have each day at school are tired, stressed, and bored. As a matter of fact, if we accounted for it, it would be about 77% of the feelings that they say they have each day are these emotions. Now, interestingly enough, people criticize us for this study because they say, well, if they just ask them how they feel, they're always going to say negative things. So what we did was we replicated the study using a more advanced methodology where we gave a student their smartphones and we randomly beeped them 5 times a day for 5 weeks. We got permission to do all this stuff, and even in their schools. And what we found over 125 momentary assessments of their feelings, was the same exact thing. Over and over again, they're telling us they're tired, they're bored, and they're stressed. Now there's lots of things that we can unpack around these data. I could spend 3 days just going through the research studies. For example, our LGBTQ youth, this is triple as uncomfortable. They're triple as stressed, etc. Our students who are in the lowest socioeconomic stratum report having the least amount of happiness, the least amount of well-being. Some of the things that I think are relevant for right now specifically are, for example, given my own childhood of bullying, I was really curious to know what is the feeling like of the bullied child. And it's basically full of fear and hopelessness. The correlation between someone who's been mean or cruel to me in the last week and my experience of fearfulness or hopelessness is around 0.55, which is a very strong correlation in this kind of research. On the other hand, positive relationships, engaging instruction, and relevance and meaningfulness, some of the things that all of you are talking about, like what you want out of this experience, are the actual things that are giving or helping students experience the most positive feelings in school. This brings up something I think that is utterly important in our nation's education, which is that we are overly focused on self-regulation. Right? All I want is for you to be regulated so I can teach you. But we don't want the adults to take responsibility for the co-regulation of the child's emotion states. And the truth is, that's what really is happening in our schools. It's not about self-regulation, it's really about the co-regulation of feeling states. Because if I came in here this morning as your teacher, and I walked in like this, another superintendent group, woohoo. Right, all of a sudden, boom, you're disengaged, right? If I walked in here and I said like, you guys, like, the sarcasm really went into cynicism, like, you gotta, that's your strategy? You gotta be kidding me. Where are you from? All of a sudden, right, you're in that fight or flight mode. So we know from decades of research, right, that emotions are the drivers of students' attentional capacity in the classroom, which means that I, as the adult, am responsible for creating that emotional climate, which means that my vocal tone, my body language, the words that I choose to use are all literally influencing your feelings, and in turn, either making it easy or difficult for you to regulate yours. Any questions about that?
Would you just repeat the statement? Emotions are drivers of.
Attentional capacity. I'm going to get much more into this, so
Okay.
You'll hear it again. Any questions other than that? Okay. So now let's go into the teachers who are co-regulating students' emotions. We decided to study 6,000 teachers across the United States, and here's what they told us they're feeling. They're frustrated. Number one emotion across all teachers, public, private, charter schools. They're stressed and overwhelmed, a little bit of happiness, but about 80% of the words they chose to use to describe their lives as teachers were negative. So how is that frustrated, overwhelmed, and stressed teacher co-regulating students' emotions? What strategies are they modeling for their students? I'll tell you, they're not modeling good ones right now, unfortunately. So this is a more advanced analysis where we looked at the driver of teachers' negative emotions, and what we found was the single biggest predictor was the culture and climate of their school. And that particular aspect of culture was the relationship aspects of the culture. That teachers who felt that the relationship between and among teachers and the principals and families were negative were the ones who experienced the most negative feelings at school. And in addition, what we found was the climate was connected to very serious outcomes, but it was mediated by their feelings. So what this says is that schools that have an unhealthy climate have teachers who are more burnt out, take days off because of stress, can't sleep well, are depressed and anxious, and even have higher body mass indexes. And it seems to be that it's driven through how they feel. So think about when you wake up in the morning and say, I hate my school. Why would I want to go back to that environment? Guess what? You feel burnt out, you say, I'm not going to go into school, I'm going to take a health day, I'm going to take a mental health break day. You ruminate at night, you get anxious, you get depressed, and you eat more. Questions about that study? Everybody looks so serious now.
How recently was it done?
Just last year.
This one.
Yeah.
I'm just really interested in the nested nature of school climate and district climate.
Yeah. Control for all that. Yeah.
And SES, is there any look at the?
Did not seem to have a factor
Okay.
in this particular project. For the
Students?
student data, yes, the students who are coming from the most unhealthy, the districts with the lowest SES, they report the same amount of stress, the same amount of boredom. However, what we find in the lower SES districts is their general happiness is lower, their general well-being is lower. But stress and boredom is the same across all SES.
I have one more question. So
Yeah.
the independent effects of unhealthy school climate persist even when they have moderating effects of negative affect are in there?
No, so
No.
that's the mediator.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yeah, so that's why, I'm not putting all the coefficients up here, but yes, it's mediated by
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah. Oh, sorry, yes.
Is that a convenient sample or like how random the sample is?
So it is a representative sample, it's not a random sample. We're replicating this right now with, just forgot the name of the group. Oh, it is RAND again. We're working with RAND again. So we have 1,200 teachers now being studied. Random sample, or a representative sample, but across the entire United States. But this is a very demographically represented sample. It's very a large demographic, public, private, and charter schools from, I think, 40 states. Any other questions? Yeah.
What did you use to assess school climate?
So we built this, we work with the New Teacher Center, I don't know if you know that, and we use their short standardized measure of school climate. Yeah, they were a partner in the study. All right, good questions, I love this. Normally, just people say, move on. So we now, yes?
I'm just interested, you talked a little bit earlier about the emotions high school students feel, and then if you took a student who's transgender, for
Yeah.
example, magnifies by
Correct.
3. So just thinking about in Oregon, many of our professional contexts are almost all white, all dominant culture identity. So what is the connection? Is it likely true then that the way that unhealthy school climate is magnified and influences educators differently based on their racial
So
identity?
it's funny, because Dina, my colleague next door, who's running the training with our team, is working on a study really trying to parse out all of the race, ethnic stuff, and we found no effects. We really were anticipating that certain teachers who were in certain environments would have different feelings, and we're just not finding it. We're finding that across the board, right? Teachers are frustrated and stressed and overwhelmed, and across the board, that the only different thing is if you're in an elite private school, you tend to feel slightly more positive feelings. Makes sense. I mean, think about it. Your life is a lot easier when you work in an elite private school, except for the crazy parents. But you know, the stress on testing is different. The class sizes are different. But other than that, we found nothing. Our African American sample, which was about 20% of the sample, when we modeled them, no differences in terms of these findings. Latino sample, no differences. So it seems to be relationships matter for everybody, and if they're not good, they make people unhappy, and feeling stressed and unhappy and overwhelmed keeps driving that burnout and our mental health and our eating, which is pretty crazy. Okay, so then I decided, let's get out of public education and private schools and charter schools, let's go to universities. And let's see how they're doing. Fabulous. So these are college students across the state of Connecticut, and thousands upon thousands of them. And as you can see, it's just not a great place right now for our college students. Even at Yale, where you think for $80,000 a year, you should be happy. You are, when you get your acceptance letter. And then 3 weeks into the semester, you are freaking out because you don't realize that everyone else is valedictorian. You realize that everyone else has more privilege than you even think you had. Everyone gets better grades than you because they have to study less than you do. I mean, it's endless what happens. As a matter of fact, getting into what I like to call emotional granularity is that even our Yale undergraduates who are not emotionally literate, they tell us, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. And then in my courses, I have them write essays about their stress, and we analyze. We do a content analysis of like the reasons for their stress. And what we find is it's not like they don't have the resources to deal with what's going on. It's that they are envious. That the themes that come up for them around their negative emotions are all about social comparison. This father is this mother is that, this kid gonna do that, I'm really an imposter. I mean, it just endlessly kind of just ruminates and just is causing destruction. Now here's the interesting thing, I went to the counseling services and I said, what's your envy reduction program? And they looked at me like I was they're like, well, we do mindfulness. I said, well, I'm a mindfulness practitioner, but I don't think that breathing is going to make the envy go away. It's just not. There's no evidence for that, by the way. Mindfulness is great for primarily anxiety and stress reduction, and even for some people it doesn't work so well. It doesn't promote like better relationships, it doesn't decrease envy, right? You've got to develop skills and you've got to learn how to restructure your thinking. Because if you're sitting there all day long thinking like I did when I got to become a professor there, like my parents didn't read Shakespeare to me. I got yelled at, go to bed. And that was it, it was done. There was no conversation. Now, my parents were good people, but when I got to be where I am now in my workplace, it was a different world for me. And it was challenging. And I even went for therapy again. And I was like, I don't know if I can deal with this place. And this is like, I don't feel like one of these people. And I went to my medical doctor, and he's like, just take some Prilosec because I had acid problems. And he goes, and I'll give you some Klonopin. I'm like, really? This is like what your strategy? Unbelievable. All right, now,
Question?
yes.
This same finding about the social comparison, the envy factor, how far back in the grades can you take that? Because I was wondering.
I can't take it far back at all for this study.
Yeah.
It's just right then and there as a
Yeah.
Yale freshman
Yeah.
or undergraduate, another place, like tell me, describe what's bringing you and causing you to have this feeling of stress. And then when you look at the themes, it's not things like I'm afraid of getting good grades, or I can't deal with it's all about like the social, comparison, fear,
I was thinking about some of the freshmen in high school. When they enter their high school environment, they seem to do that same type of activity.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
With their peers.
Yeah, good question. Yes, and yes.
Do you have anything about looking back on a situation versus in the moment? Because in the moment, you're always feeling that stress and anxiety, but successfully completing that moment creates a looking back of happiness, or versus unsuccessfully completing the moment.
So I have done longitudinal kind of experience sampling, more time seriesy kind of stuff, and just to call it what it was, in one of my projects, I tracked students' feeling states and the reasons for their feeling states 23 times across the semester, and just looked at their patterns. And what you find over and over again is that they continuously become more self-critical instead of less self-critical. Their self-compassion diminishes across the semester because they're just constantly in that state of worry about their future in terms of performing at their best, and also thinking that everyone else is going to do better than them and that they're going to actually drop out. So it's not a pretty picture right now, at least in the research that I've done around their development of healthy regulation strategies. Now, I should say, I've done 3 randomized controlled trials on college campuses with a program that I built for college students, and I'm proud to say that it has dramatically decreased these things. So we've shown decreases in burnout in non-college students, we've shown decreases in stress and anxiety and depression. We've shown increases in general life satisfaction, increases in engagement. So they just don't know this. They really have, and especially students who go to more the Ivy League kind of universities, they've just been pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where they have a lot of them say they don't even know who they are. So another example is a group of my students, I did a focus group with them, and they said, we kind of feel like we've been manufactured, that we don't really have an identity, like I play this instrument because of this, and I learned to play the violin. I never wanted to play the violin, but like that was going to make me unique, but it's nothing about who they are as people. So that does get into the past. Now, workplace. So I was very fortunate that I got a grant now to get out of schools because it's not a good place. And I said, let me go into 15,000 people's work lives. So here's what we found. They're also stressed. So if you work at Goldman Sachs, or if you work at Charles Schwab, or you work as a farmer or at the grocery store, it doesn't really matter. Pretty much everyone's stressed. I don't know if they know. I don't think people have the words really to describe. You can see a lot of little words in there from like people who have maybe a little bit more advanced vocabulary, but the majority of people just say stressed. So let's go back to our medidor emocional. And what we notice is what? We're out of balance. We're just emotionally out of balance as a nation, whether it be schools or workplaces. And I'm going to be the first person to tell you that the goal can't be to just feel all yellow. I've gone through that already. But the goal has to be, if we want a nation and we want kids to thrive, we've got to swap. Instead of 70-30, how about 30-70? Life is not meant to be in the red and blue 70% of the time. And when we ask people, how do you hope to feel, that's what they tell us. They're very clear about how they want to feel. They say, I want to feel happy, I want to feel supported, I want to feel respected and appreciated. I think happy is the #1 word just because it's like the automatic word that people come to. When you pull happiness out of the model, you get much more interesting words. If you take happy out, you get appreciated, respected, supported, valued, satisfied, accomplished, energized, excited. I'm curious, how many of you think that your lives would be a little better if you felt more of these feelings every day? Yes? I think so. That brings us to the goal of our center, right, which is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And this is now what I call my money slide. Because I've had the privilege of spending time with many a superintendent and principal and department of ed person who will criticize the work and say, you know, like, I don't know about this feeling stuff. You know, it's all about facts, not feelings. I think major CEO of a charter school network, she goes, it's facts, not feelings. Like, for you it is. And we're obviously not going to work together ever, but for the kids, I feel sorry for the ones who are in your schools. And I visited these schools, and I can tell you, they're like prisons. They are. I mean, to walk on the white line, to go from the classroom to the bathroom. How is that going to generate creativity and innovation and autonomy and belongingness? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like we have no trust for kids. So, what we've done and what we've culminated, it's not just all my research, there's tons of great people doing work in this field. Castle we have a whole research group that does research in this area. Is I believe, and this is my book that I just finished, is all about these 5 things. Why do feelings matter? Like, why should we take this work seriously? The first is because emotions are the drivers of our attention. So Chuck, that's your thing you were asking about. The simplest way to think about this is that our brains can only handle so much negative emotion. Everyday stress is fine. You want to put, actually, moderate levels of anxiety is helpful to achieve. I always joke, I like to hire people who have like a little bit of an anxiety disorder. He gets started. Love it. I have one guy who's my guru of mindfulness in our center. He's like, Mark, we need more breaks. I'm like, damn, no, you need to write a paper. No breaks. Like, you need to stop thinking that you're a guru sitting on a cushion and everybody's like rolling their eyes when they walk by your office. As you can see, I have strong feelings about this guy. I love this guy, but I'm like, enough is enough. And the point being is that when you are, like I was in middle school, overwhelmed and stressed and scared and fearful and hopeless, you can't focus. I mean, it's so simple that it's like, but you don't know these things when you're a 13-year-old. And the teachers who were educating me didn't know it because they weren't paying attention to my feelings. No one ever asked me how I felt. The only person who ever asked me was Uncle Marvin. And so here I am sitting in the classroom worrying about how I'm going to get to class B without getting my head slammed in the locker or spit on in the bathroom or beat up on the bus ride home. Why would I care about the Roman oligarchy? Why would I care about learning geometry? I just want to be safe. I want someone to be kind to me. And when we don't have those life experiences, we have strong negative emotions, which then put us into fight or flight mode. The second is decision making. Oftentimes we don't like to think that our feelings are behind our decision making. I do also training for the doctors at Yale and the residents at Yale, and we've shown in research that their stress and burnout levels can literally change their diagnoses and their medical errors. People don't want to believe it. They're like, how is it that just because I'm feeling this way that I would make a medical error? Well, it's because your emotions change the way your brain operates and where you put your attention. When it comes to teachers, what I'll tell you is the following. I've done this research myself. Random assignment, controlled studies. Good mood, bad mood, good mood, bad mood. Take 5 minutes and write about a good day. Bad day, good day, bad day, good day, bad day. That's random assignment. Immediately thereafter, I gave every single teacher in this study the same essay to grade. Any thoughts about the differences in the evaluations? There was a 1 to 2 full grade difference in the way the teachers evaluated the same exact essay, just based on their mood state. Now, after that was over, I said that, do you believe it, how you felt, and your influence over the way you graded the paper? 87% deny it. No one wants to believe that their mood state literally biased their evaluation. Think about it, it's pretty weird if you did. Yes, because I was irritable, he failed. Right? I mean, think about that. No one's going to want to admit that. And we're not even conscious of it anyway, because the idea behind this, on the role of emotions and judgment, is that it happens outside of our conscious awareness. Because when we're conscious of how we're feeling, the bias doesn't exist, which is the more interesting thing of it all. That you can be pissed and still be accurate. You can be down and still be accurate. You just got to know in that moment that you're feeling that way. It's when you're not cognizant of it that it bleeds into. The third is relationship quality. We argue in our center, and the whole theory of emotional intelligence is predicated on the fact that emotions are about approaching and avoiding. So when you're feeling unpleasant emotions, what happens? You want to... Now here's what's interesting. When children are experiencing strong negative emotions like anger or anxiety, but let's take anger for a minute, right? What are they saying to you? They're actually saying, I need help. But it looks like an avoid emotion. So there's this real conundrum here because we're, I hate you, I hate you. Brain's like, go to your room, I can't deal with you right now. But the truth is, I'm crying for help. But because the strong negative emotion is coming at you, you have an avoid reaction. But yet your true reaction has got to be to regulate the adult, to co-regulate. The co-regulation happens when you monitor the self-regulation in that unpleasant place, so that way you can support the child in down-regulating. But we tend to be more avoidant when there's negative emotions coming at us. The fourth is physical and mental health. I think we've talked about this enough. What you should know from the national data is that depression is now the leading cause of disability. 25% of our adolescents are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. 40% of our adults are obese. And the list just keeps going on and on and on. Finally, performance and creativity. One of the things that we now have at the Center for Emotional is as we call it, the Creativity Lab. I'm just really interested in highly creative people. I'm now doing a study with A-list actors. So I'm taking some of the top actors across the world, and then they've agreed to participate in research. I'm really interested in what are the strategies they've used, toward the thousands of auditions they've had to go through and get rejected. Right? Is it grit, or is it something like emotional intelligence? And what I found in my high school studies of highly creative high schoolers is that it's not grit. That we think it's grit because it's an easy variable to study. And Angela Duckworth is a friend, and grit does work for many things, but it doesn't work for long-term pursuits. It works like for example, on the plane right here, I had to edit someone's paper. If it's bad writing, it's like, So all the freaking emotion regulation strategies in the world are not going to help me. I'm just like, Mark, squash your feelings and just get through this freaking thing. That's where grit comes in handy. An hour of plow through it. Don't even think about your feelings. But when it comes to dealing with life, right, you need a much broader set of strategies to manage the frustration, to manage being overwhelmed, to manage the feedback that you get. The people who, I call them the dream stealers. The people who say, Mark, I don't think this is going to work. And I'm like, ugh. How do I deal with the feeling of that power, because I'm a victim of bullying, and I am very sensitive to power, because of the people who bullied me were always bigger and stronger and more, popular than I was. So when that happens to me in those settings, I regress to being like a 12-year-old automatically, whether I want to or not. And that 12-year-old is not very skilled. So the question is, what are the strategies I engage with in that moment to say, Mark, you're 49. Oh yeah. Mark, you're a professor. Yeah. Mark, you're 50, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then I still want to run. Because it's hard. And so it can't just be a single concept, right? It has to be a broader set of strategies that we teach kids. Any questions about the basics? So when people say, you know, why do emotions matter, or why should we be doing this, I just always go back to they call it like the big five of emotional intelligence: attention, memory, learning, decision making, relationships, health, performance, and creativity. So now the question for all of you is the following: are you an emotion scientist, or are you an emotion judge? Now, obviously, I'm persuading you to be an emotion scientist, so let's be real here. I've already biased your perceptions of these questions, but putting that aside, the emotion scientist says, you know, I'm really curious about how people feel. The emotion judge says, I don't know, whatever. The emotion scientist says, you know, I'm in learning mode. I want to know how people are feeling, I want to ask good questions. I'm open to exploring multiple emotion regulation strategies. I have a growth mindset, like, good, I failed today at regulating, but tomorrow I am going to be better. The emotion judge, critical, always a no, like, why are you so angry all the time? They tell people how they feel. They ignore feelings. They're generally closed about feelings. You know, don't talk about feelings in this house. And have more of a fixed mindset around developing these skills. Like, this is how I regulate. Learn to deal with me. Like, I did this talk at a corporate setting recently, and the CEO of this very well-known financial group in Manhattan, he looked at me and he goes, you know, Mark, interesting stuff, but not for me. And I said, well, tell me more. And he goes, well, like, look at me. I'm the CEO of this company. I make millions of dollars a year. I don't need this blank. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he goes, but I'm thinking, maybe the people who work for me should learn it, because then they can have the skills to deal with me. So, you know, different mindsets. You know, I interviewed then the people who work for him. Let me tell you, he's not, you know, he's going to be, when he gets old, he's going to be lying alone. No one's going to run to his house to take care of him. Ask yourself the question, are you the scientist or are you the judge? Ask yourself a deeper question. Are you a scientist with some people and a judge with other people? What's the evidence for your own emotion scientist or emotion judge behavior? People sometimes don't like that I use the judge piece. Now, a judge in the courts is fine. A judge for feelings is never good. It's never good to be a judge about your own or other people's feelings. All right. Turn to your partner again. Just take about a minute or so. Like, what are you thinking about at this point in the training? Go ahead.
In a way. But kind of like you said,
That's all the stuff. Yeah. I know, I was thinking the same thing.
All right, let's come back together. So where are people at? How are we doing? How are you feeling right now as we're almost 2/3 through? Yeah? So we've gone from that little mood meter thing, and now it's like, now we're like diving into those quadrants, because every one of these things varies as a function of every quadrant. Right? Our decision making, our relationships, our health, all function differently within each of those quadrants. Certain mood states are great for certain things and not other things, right? So if I want to get my students to be attentive, come on, get high energy. If I want them to be chilled out during a read aloud, I want them to be in the green. If I want them to be reflective, I might want them to be a little blue. If I want them to write a persuasive essay, I want them to be in the red. So that was telling us that not only do we feel emotions and label them about how we are doing in the moment, but we can actually be strategic about infusing the principles of emotions into the teaching and learning process. Any questions or comments at this point? Yes?
I appreciate this because it's, on a pragmatic level for me, that this is really useful. I think I'm a principal that stepped into a session the other day, and he was just gnarly. He was just so negative about things. I'm immediately judgmental.
Yeah.
I'm critical. I had to approach it with him, or I chose to a couple days later, and I was able to settle my own emotions. And it was, you know, why?
So your strategy was you needed 3 days.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. What was going on, and the outcome of that, compared to had I approached it initially, markedly different.
Yeah.
So I like this. Just okay, I wonder why, instead of he's sure being negative. So that's helpful for me.
Yeah, you don't know his story, and there could be a zillion reasons why he's having those feelings. So that leads us to the question: what are the skills that the emotion scientist uses? What do you think? What are the underlying skills of the emotional scientist? Anyone?
Listening skills.
Listening skills.
Questions.
Empathy.
Questions.
Questions.
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness. So communication, listening, empathy, compassion. What's interesting is that I think we do a lot of this in our world, is we confuse skills with traits and competencies. So, for example, being empathic is more of a trait. It's not a skill necessarily, right? You need underlying skills to engage in empathy. Also, to be a good listener or to be a good communicator. What goes underneath that? And you all failed the ruler test.
Yes.
So when we go deeper into what the skills of the emotion scientist is a magician, is a wizard at reading people and reading oneself. They understand the reasons for emotions. They understand, wow, it seems like you're angry, or you might be angry because, or no, it's not anger, it's disappointment. Oh no, it's frustration. No, it's pressure. No, it's stress. Has the language to describe emotions. Knows how and when to express emotions across contexts, and has the skills of emotion regulation. So when we go deeper into these skills, the first one is recognizing. Being highly aware of one's own emotions, paying attention to those dimensions on the mood meter. What's happening for me here, what's happening for me for here, what's happening for you there. Understanding emotion, knowing the cause of that feeling state. So I'm going to test you on this skill right now. At your table groups, you've got 1 minute. And by the way, I like to gamble. Not really, but I will gamble on this one. I just went to the coffee shop here in this conference center, and they sell Starbucks coffee. Very disappointed and angry, and I'll get over it though. I want a really good cup of coffee, like a 2-shot Americano with about an inch of steamed whole milk. And I want a 7-ounce cup, which didn't make, but we're gonna find one. So we're gonna make this bet. If you get it right at your table group, I buy your table coffees. If you get it wrong, I get a gift certificate to the best coffee shop in Portland. for $20. I don't know how $20 in my wallet, but we're all administrators, you can afford a $20 bet. So here's the bet. You gotta get it right. There's no like 50%, 60%, it's 100% or nothing. What is the difference between anger and disappointment? You know this probably, so you can't say a word. And if you forgot it, shame on you. What is the psychological difference between anger and disappointment? You've got 1 minute. Go to work. I don't know, you're gonna talk about it? Come up with your decision.
Like on the spectrum of negativity. I don't think. Something about struggle.
Time is up. Hands in the air. Let's come out together. These are like, this is like third grade vocabulary, by the way. So who's confident? Any camera group willing to make the bet?
I'll take that, because I don't have $40.
So you can borrow 5 from your colleagues. Is your team willing to cough up $5?
I don't know, you guys confident enough? Sure. I'll pay you back. It's our sense that anger has a physiological component to it
Yep.
that disappointment does not have, and that disappointment has a cognitively kind of organized component to it that anger does not have.
What do you think?
It's better than what the rest of us have.
Stuff like being attacked. See, now I'm really nervous.
What's that?
I'm really nervous.
It's okay.
I've been nervous all day.
Take a breath, relax. Go get a glass of water, borrow a sweater. All right, so anyone want to add to that? So far, we've got a single decaf shot with no water. That was compassion, Seth. Yes.
So mine was very similar. I was thinking more of the physiological.
But I didn't ask for that, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be specific here.
Okay.
Listening skills, people. I asked you for the psychological difference between anger and disappointment.
Okay, so I was thinking the mood meter.
So what's the psychology?
Well, I would think that it would be higher on that energy piece to be.
But that's not psychological. I'm
Okay,
pushing you.
okay.
Yes.
We don't drink coffee and we don't bet. But we'd like to add, maybe.
Boring.
Yeah. The psychological difference for me is I'm thinking anger is an element of I can't stand this. I can't stand what's in front of me. Disappointment is a psychological element. It's like disappointed yet I can roll with this, I can stand this, I can figure this
All
out.
right, so can you put that into language?
I can't stand it versus I can stand it.
Yes.
I'd like to add that I think disappointment is an internal process and anger is an external process.
You never been angry with yourself?
When I get angry with myself, I'm still, I
Okay.
have to release that anger. When I'm disappointed, keep it in.
Okay.
I don't go and say, I'm so disappointed!
All right. So lots of ideas here, and we're getting somewhere. Not sure where that is. Doesn't count. Here's the simplest definitions. Disappointment, unmet expectations. I anticipated a positive outcome. Everything was legit. It didn't happen. I'm disappointed. I got a study guide. There were 15 things I had to know. I knew every one of them. Somehow or another, I just messed up the exam. There's no one to blame. I just didn't know it. I didn't do as good as I wanted. I got the B. I'm disappointed in myself. Anger, same study guide, but the teacher put surprise items on the test, and the kid got only those wrong. That's not fair. So anger has the theme of unfairness and injustice. That's the psychological difference, is the perceptions of the unmet expectations versus the injustice. The question is, does that matter? Should you know that? Why? Why would it matter that you, as the adult teaching and raising kids, understands the psychological theme of anger's injustice and disappointments, unmet expectations, and fears, impending danger, and anxieties, uncertainty, and pride's accomplishments? Why does that matter?
You ask different questions.
Yeah, you can ask different questions. Exactly. Because if you, the adult, don't really understand the themes that you're hearing from kids around their feeling states, you're going to label the feelings for them. They're going to be inaccurate labeling, and you got to name it to tame it. Because think about the strategy was the disappointment, the anger. The disappointment is, Mark, let's review what you did, let's check it out. The anger is like, maybe we need to have a conversation with your teacher because I don't know what really happened here. Totally different strategy to support the regulation of the feeling based on really understanding its psychological theme. Make sense? Even if it doesn't, it will eventually. Which brings us to labeling. You gotta have the words. It can't just be good or bad. You gotta have the granularity. And that's what the mood meter does for us. There, in the beginning, we have an app with 100 words, and then it goes into 200 to 500 to 1,000, 2,000. RUNL, a ruler, is what I like to call the first 3 skills of emotional intelligence. Those 3 skills help us to make meaning out of our own and other people's emotional lives. When you can recognize, understand, and label, you can understand self and other. We're going to try now your skills at RUL. Here we go. I come home from school. You're my parent. It's possible. And I hate school. I'm never going back to school again. I hate school. That's all you get. How am I feeling? Angry. Lonely. Defeated. Powerless. Frustrated. Freeze. Angry, defeated, powerless, lonely, whatever else you said. What's your evidence? The words I use? How confident are you in your labeling?
I wanted to know more about why.
You want to know more about why. So here's one of the big lessons of emotional intelligence. Behavior does not equal emotion. We automatically attribute emotion to behavior because it makes life easier. Because we want to label things. It's our natural instinct is to label something so that we can make choices around how to behave. But behavior does not equal emotion. Same exact example. When I was a kid, my parents, because I was bullied and my mother didn't know what to do, my father didn't know what to do, they put me into karate. It happened to work out for me, at least later on. The beginning was not good. But I went into karate. I failed my freaking yellow belt test. I mean, think about it. I'm a bullied kid with low self-esteem. I go to karate and I fail a freaking yellow belt test. It is not a pretty scene. I came home, and thank you for laughing at me.
Quit laughing. Been there, done that.
Been there, done that?
Yeah.
I'm going to write that one down. Willamette. Empathy and Willamette. I come back home. Actually, the truth is my mother was waiting for me in the car, right, anticipating that her son was going to finally have something to be proud of. I hate you. How could you make me go to karate? Yelling, screaming. My mother, is that approach or avoid? Avoid. My mother, who couldn't deal with her own feelings, who do you think you are talking to that way? Sent me to my room. Here, mother, speak to father. Billy, you're not going to believe the way Mark spoke to me again. Father comes upstairs. Mark, for crying out loud, how many times I got to tell you not to speak? I can't take it anymore. I can't. Now here's the deal. What they don't know is that I failed the yellow belt test. I was putting on my street clothes, right, to go home, and one of the bullies, who was also in karate, came up to me and said, you're a freaking blank, 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 and wait till you see what it looks like for you to, on your way to school tomorrow. So now I've gotten punished for my behavior towards my mother. No one knows that I'm actually freaking fearful, feeling shame, and the story goes on. Do you see what I'm getting at here? When we misperceive emotion for behavior, or behavior, we use behavior as an indicator of a kid's feeling states, we're losing 90% of the information. Because in certain environments, boys can't show their this. I'm not going to come, Dad, you do my little test. Because my father was a tough guy from the Bronx, New York. All he wanted me to be was like him. I never became my father in terms of being a tough guy. I have a 5th degree black belt. I mean, I could eliminate anyone in this room. I choose not to do that. But my point is, I'm a talented martial artist, but I'm not a tough guy. It's just not in my, I don't have it. So my father was looking at me, trying to make me a tough guy. It never happened. Because he had different rules than I did, and then my mother did, and then other people did around expressing feelings. My father believed that feelings were weak. That when you express your feelings, that doesn't make you a man. Men don't worry about these feeling states. There's a lot to learn here. Why didn't I express my feelings to my parents in a real way? Why didn't I have the conversation? Why didn't they notice the cues on a regular basis when I was coming home with low self-esteem and feelings of shame? And say, hey Mark, I'm noticing something in your facial expression. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. Let's talk about it. Never happened. Maybe because it never happened for them. There were rules in their context around emotion. I was just in Hong Kong last week. The rules in Hong Kong are completely different than they are here around the expression of emotion. For example, in Korea, I go to South Korea a lot because of my martial arts background. Right, the rules are completely different. They're different than Hong Kong even. For example, when I went to, South, Mark-san. Right, everybody bows to me. None of you bowed to me this morning. Would have been a nice gesture. But we don't do that in Lam. All right. So it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's the scientist going into that context and saying, what are the rules here? Instead of saying my rules, right? I did a talk on Wall Street. Hello, Dr. Brackett. And I was like, hi. Like, I don't know how to do that. I just don't know how to do that. But that's the rule. So my handshake is a little bit firmer when I do a talk, at Madison Avenue or Wall Street than it is in New Haven, Connecticut. You got to learn those contexts and those rules. Personality influences those rules. I'm an introvert. People think I'm outgoing. I really don't like people. I really like being alone. Like, plane rides are great for me. I don't talk to the person next to me, and I just can focus, be alone, quiet, no phone work. Love it. After a training like this, I'll be drained, and I won't want to go to like a sports bar and have loud music, and I want to take a walk, and maybe I'm going to take a yoga class tonight to just settle. That's what I need. Other people need different things. Don't be the judge. Let everybody be the scientist, and you be the scientist. Gender. There are rules around gender in motion expression. Guess what? If you watched the tennis match, a year ago, Serena Williams, there were clear rules around gender and race in terms of what you can say or not say. Social norms, power. Power is a big piece of this. I'm a director of a center, I've got 60 staff. There are implicit rules that don't tell Mark if you're anxious because they'll think you're weak. When it's the opposite, I want to know. I want to be wasting your time. Tell me that you're nervous about what I've asked you to do so I can get you the support you need. But people have these underlying themes not themes, but perceptions. And then the larger cultural norms. I don't know how diverse it is here in Willamette, but my hunch is that you may have influences from other countries in some of your schools. And eye contact is different in different cultures. It has different meaning. Deference to authority is different. And again, when you approach this through the lens of the emotion scientist, you make fewer errors. The goal of this work is not to be right. The goal of this work is to make less mistakes. Which leads us to emotion regulation. What are those strategies that we use to help us manage our emotions on a daily basis and remembering that emotion regulation is not our temperament. So I am a neurotic individual. I was born with high personality traits which called neuroticism. I worry about why I worry. I even worry about why I worry about why I worry. And I don't know nothing to worry about. But my default is something's probably gonna go wrong. So I've got to deal with that in my life. And I've learned a zillion strategies for it. But it's not my experience of feeling, it's not my skill with feeling. Do you hear me on that? My experience, my natural proclivity toward experiencing certain emotions has nothing to do with my skill. There are people who have high neuroses like me who are unskilled, and people who have high neuroses who are masters at managing their emotions. As a matter of fact, someone like me gets more practice because I'm just constantly, in that little kind of place. So it helps me to be I'm more aware of it. So it's not a weakness, it's actually a strength. But people tend to equate kind of neurotic personalities and emotional instability with weak. It actually can make you stronger. I said already earlier that we need to not just focus on self-regulation, but on co-regulation. That it's not just about what I can do, what I can tell you to do to regulate. We've got to think about the back and forth between the adults and the kids themselves in terms of how they regulate. Any of these strategies look familiar to you? About a month ago, I gave a talk in New York City, and two of my favorites were from these teachers. They said, I just put my feelings in a box when I come to school. It's like, whoa. Maybe you do negative self-talk?
Odd.
Maybe you're a denier, maybe you're a suppressor, maybe you're a ruminator. For years at work, I was a wishful thinker about people I didn't get along with. I'm like, they're going to change one day. Never happened. I used to be a procrastinator. Now I'm not anymore. I was a yeller and screamer at one point in my life. Certainly have avoided many things to not have difficult feelings. So those strategies are interesting because they oftentimes require a little effort. They oftentimes happen outside of our awareness. They become habitual, and some of them even feel good. Like having that third glass of wine can feel good. Right? Yelling at someone sometimes you feel powerful when you yell at someone. Activate that parasympathetic nervous system to deactivate the arousal, lower the cortisol levels, so you can be more present. We have a thing I'm working on. Have you heard of Class Dojo here? Yeah, so I have a project with them that's launching I think this Friday. We're doing a world mindfulness moment. We're asking teachers to take 5 minutes to just stop everything they're doing and take a breath. And we know that this helps. The second big one is sleeping. How much sleep are you getting? Are you getting your 7 to 9 hours? What you should know is that your ability to deal with your feeling states is a product of your sleep. There's a biological piece to this. If your brain does not restore itself, you will not be able to have good regulation strategies. It's that your threshold becomes shorter and shorter and shorter. The fuse gets shorter and shorter and shorter with the less sleep you have. Are you moving? This morning when I woke up, I think I got up at 6:45, and I said to myself, you should get up, Mark, and do 15 minutes exercise. And then my evil brain said, but you're so, God, you were on a flight last night, you're so tired, you should get the extra 15 minutes lying in bed. And then that's what I did. And now I'm angry with myself for not getting my 15 minutes of just push-ups and crunches in. So it's hard work, as you all know, exercising. I will fit it in today, it's my goal. But here's what you need to know, right? It decreases anxiety, stress, and depression. So just getting out there and moving is a form of healthy emotion regulation. There's been experiments done where people have been in exercise conditions and non-exercise conditions, and then they're asked to deal with a difficult problem, like an interpersonal situation. You deal better with it after you've exercised. Are you eating healthy foods? It's another core strategy for emotion regulation. These are all things that have nothing to do with cognition, right? They're just basic principles of healthy eating, movement, sleep. Here's what you need to know as well, and I didn't know this until a couple years ago. Everybody's on this like neurotic thing, no carbs, carbs are killers. But if you don't eat carbs, you lose your energy because your brain needs glucose. And if you don't have glucose, your brain doesn't produce it. Eating a protein bar doesn't give you the glucose you need. You gotta have some healthy carbs. So lo and behold, you eat a little bit of carbs, you get the energy you need, you're functioning in a better place. You'll regulate better. Co-regulation. The mere presence of a caring person helps you regulate. Just being around people who are kind and compassionate is a strategy in and of itself. Recent study, only 34% of children believe they have a caring adult at school. That's crazy, right? That doesn't require you buying any program or me coming here to speak. That requires a very simple model of getting every teacher in your school to make sure they have a relationship with at least one kid. Are you compassionate to yourself? We talk about being compassionate to others, but are you self-compassionate? When you make a mistake, what's your first thing that you say to yourself? Is temporary, you mess up once in a while, or is it, I'm stupid, I can't believe myself, this is ridiculous. What I can tell you is that our negative self-talk starts really early. I still struggle with my negative self-talk, and I'm 49. And it started from other people in my childhood defining who I was. Telling me about, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too short, you're too tall, your nose is too big, your nose is too short, your hair is this way, you walk this way. I mean, it's amazing how easy it is for other people to start defining our realities, and then we start creating a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then we start rehearsing that over and over and over again. I have a niece, she's like my daughter. She was adopted from Guatemala, and she's dark-skinned, and she lives in upstate New York, which is a very white neighborhood, and she was bullied in kindergarten. Someone said to her, "You're a different color than your mother." At 5. Completely devastated. It shattered this little girl's soul because she felt alienated, she felt scared, she felt different, she felt all these feelings. Her mom, who's really my cousin, but we're like a closer family, she called me, and by the way, she is like not good at this stuff. Her mother is like, she's like, if you want to see someone who doesn't manage her emotions well, meet my cousin. And so she calls me up and she goes, "Mark, get in my truck, and I'm running over that kid and her mother." That's my strategy. That has nothing to do with Esme, right? We're going to focus on Esme. We don't care about the other kid right now. We're going to focus on your daughter. And let me tell you how much work we had to put into helping Esme restructure her thinking around who she was as a human being. How much time we put in to help her realize that she's got uncles and nieces and nephews, and uncles and cousins who are also multiracial. That she's not alone in her skin color being different. How much time we had to put into her having positive self-talk around, her adoption and her identity. Endless. And she's now in high school. She's doing great. Not obviously, but I'm proud that she's doing great. But it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Little people say things and bring you back. Never stops. So a few tips about self-talk. 1, interestingly enough, research shows that when you try to engage in self-talk, you have to use, or it's better to use the third person. Instead of saying, "Take the high road," or "I can do this," you actually say your name. "Mark, you can get through this." That simple distancing, it's called, is very helpful for healthy emotion regulation. So you just say, "Mark, you can do this. Mark, take the high road. Mark, remember you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence." It sounds funny, I use it a lot. Because I'm thinking, what's my reputation going to be from this strategy? It makes a difference. The second is positive reappraisal. Are you looking at things through a different lens? Can you just tell yourself a different story? So, I'll never be able to do this because I've given up my martial arts just because I just don't have time to engage in that process anymore. Now I'm a hot yoga person. I like very difficult yoga, like handstands and different twists and all that kind of stuff. And there are days when I'm just like really tired or I can't do the move, and it's like, Mark, you're old, you're never gonna be able to do this anymore, you might as well start doing restorative yoga. And it's like, wait a minute, Mark, you've done this 3 times. You haven't practiced. You've been on the plane for 2 weeks. You know, you're tight. Let it go. You've only just learned this pose. Like, there's got to be another way to tell ourselves stories. So here's what we know. Healthy emotion regulation, and now I want to take us back to the opening piece, where we were discussing those strategies that you were coming up with. These are the characteristics. They're effortful. They're developmental. They're specific to the emotion or situation. They're personalized, because strategies that may work for one religion may not work for another. For example, my team was over in Qatar just this week, and the rules in Qatar are different, completely different. Gender rules, religious rules. You can't just go give someone a hug. You just can't do it. So that's not an option. So you can't have that as your required strategy. They have to be permitted. They have to be encouraged. And very importantly, going back to my niece, they've got to be practiced. You've got to follow up and find out how it's going. You've got to evaluate its effectiveness for every child, and then you've got to help them try new ones. Because oftentimes, I tried that, didn't work. Like everybody says, you got to apologize. Sometimes you apologize, and I don't care if you apologize, I still hate you. My strategy doesn't work. No, that's only one strategy. You need a wide range of strategies. Does that make sense, everybody? This is why I will argue until my end that this work is harder than the traditional academic work. Because honestly, you know, when I got up this morning, I had my breakfast in the hotel, I had my eggs and my potatoes, which was so good, but anyway. I had my Americano, I got the $16 bill, I gave him the 20, I got my $4 back. I don't know how many times I have to go to school to know that 20 minus 16 equals 4. Cold cognitive learning. How many times do you have to learn that to get it? Not very many. Does that make sense? But that coffee is not the way I and I'm still ruminating about it because I was having this anticipation. I'm in Oregon and the best coffee capital. To get my point, it's like the real life things are the hard things to work with. You know, if you're in a relationship, some of you like me, I've been married now for 24 years. That's a long time to look at somebody in bed. Shouldn't have said that, right? But you look, right? But point, right? You're in relationships, and you look up, you know, and you're like, some weeks it's a good week, and you feel good at work, and you feel good about your life, and you get along great at dinner. And there are some days you come home from work, and you're like, I really don't want to have dinner with you. I love you to death, but I just need to be alone, and I want to. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? I feel like I'm like talking to myself here. My point is that this stuff is everyday work. Whereas the cold cognitive stuff is you learn much of it and then you just know it. Even though you know the strategies, you sometimes can't use them because you're tired and you're hungry and you didn't exercise and you have no relationships and you've been triggered. So here we go. People who are higher in these skills, guess what? They do better in life. These are adolescents. Here's our teachers. Here's what research shows on teachers. How many of you have ever worked with a principal who may not have had high emotional intelligence? Anyone? All right, let's see what that looks like. So in one study, what we did was remember that Wordle I showed you of frustration being the #1 feeling from teachers? We looked at, does that look different if you break it down between teachers who work for a high versus a low emotionally intelligent leader? Anyone see a difference in those Wordles? Sure. Now here's the, I mean, to me this is one of the most interesting, it's such a small study for me, but yet it blows my mind because it's one variable. It's just one condition. We just took a median split to keep this simple, high versus low in emotional intelligence. And then you just look at the words that teachers use in those schools to describe their leaders, or to describe their emotional lives.
So I have to ask you a question about your variable though. Is that reported from the teachers or is that from the principals themselves?
It's a behavior indicator, it's a behavioral measure. So it's not.
Observed by whom?
Observed by the teachers.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not about their underlying, like, I regulate well. It's a very clear behavioral indicator.
Okay.
So, good question. And it also brought up something around like, well, maybe it's just about like, they're easier or they're harder to work for. And what we found was there was no difference in workload. As a matter of fact, teachers who were in the high EI actually worked slightly harder in their schools. But they also had significantly higher burnout. They also were more likely to leave the teaching profession that year. They also had less job satisfaction. And I have many, this is another paper that's coming out that's looking at, it's one of the first to look at the role of the principal skills in terms of building the emotional climate of the school. Okay, questions? All right, our last part, and we got 23 minutes, is what is this thing called ruler? My hope is that together we can move this area of the United States away from hodgepodge, piecemeal, kits, simple things, flavors of the month. It doesn't work. There is no evidence to show that it works. I just wrote a paper that got published. It took me 5 freaking years to write this paper on a deep analysis of all the bullying prevention programs that are around in the United States of America. And guess what? There's very little evidence that they have any impact in reducing bullying. Why is that? Because classroom rules don't change behavior. Why is it? Because zero tolerance policies don't develop skills. Why is it? Is that unless you focus on shifting the culture and the climate of the school, you're not going to get the changes that you want. So that brings us to Ruler's theory of change. And there are basically 4 components of it. The first is, what is this thing called Ruler? Like, what's the strategy of Ruler? And importantly, and I tell you this because I started off, Ruler was a middle school manual back 18 years ago. That's all we had, one little book. And a couple schools did it, and we failed horrifically. And then we built tools for teachers, then we built more tools, then we built tools for principals, and now I've got administrators in the room. Because what we've learned is that to do this work well, adult, personal, and professional learning, school-wide tools, and actual content and outside of school time content. We've partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs for the last 3 years to build that. Online platforms and coaching support, and you gotta be able to monitor and evaluate. Is this working in my environment? Now, we can't support you unless you get millions of dollars in grants to do the real hardcore like RCT analyses. Those are very, very expensive studies. There are districts, for example, Fairfax County, Virginia. We have a randomized controlled trial of Ruler going on there that's being evaluated by the University of Virginia. So we do those rigorous studies to show causal impact on X, Y, or Z, and we've done those ourselves, but now we have other people do them. Within a school or district, it really has to do with fidelity of implementation, right? You want to look at, are we doing what the developers intended, and are we tracking this over time to make sure that we are seeing the results that we want? Everybody's got to be on the bus. There are 4 primary aims for Ruler. The first is we want to shift people's beliefs. I want to get more people to be emotion scientists. The second is we want to develop the skills. The third is that we want to focus on that healthy emotional climate. And the fourth is that we've got to make sure it's infused into all the components, whether it be the pedagogy or the policies. Right? If your behavior management or behavior support systems don't have an emotional intelligence component of it, you're not doing the work. If teachers are not infusing this into their pedagogy and thinking about how kids feel during the school day, you're not doing the work. If you're not asking teachers to constantly monitor their own self-regulation and co-regulation skills, you're not doing the work. So there are tools, and this came about as a trial and error journey over the last 20 years. The first tool we call the Emotional Intelligence Charter. And the goal of that charter is to say, we've got too many rules and not enough feelings in our schools. So just like I showed you those wordles about how people feel and want to feel, what we do in our work is we asked the principal of the school in New York, so she worked with her teachers on the feelings that they want to have more of working in their school. These are classroom charts. That's a 5th grade in LA. This is a, I don't know, middle school in Bridgeport, Connecticut, I think. But the focus is on the environment, the people themselves, asking the difficult question, how do I want to feel? This is a high school, I think in New Hampshire. Spirited, united, respected, determined, empowered. One of my favorites was, you know, as you may know, almost all schools in Seattle public schools use Ruler. And we've been there for years. And one of the early visits I had, it's like 4 or 5 years ago, I walked into a 4th grade classroom and they had built their beautiful emotional intelligence chart with all the words. One of the words, I just was ridiculous. And it said selfless. And so, I'm a scientist, I believe no one. And I went into that classroom and I randomly picked a 4th grader, I think it was a 5th grader, I can't remember. And I said, hey you, selfless? Like how did your class come up with the word selfless for your emotional intelligence chart? And this boy looked at me with such an earnest expression, he goes, sir, we determined as a class that everyone's becoming narcissistic. So we have made this the year everyone to be selfless. Okay, go for it. You know, always a learner, by the way. I didn't know that word until I was like in my 40s. Then there's that mood meter. So just so you know, like everyone there right now is building a mock charter. They're actually going through the process. I'm not doing that with you, but they are actually building one as an example from their school to then bring that back to do that with the faculty and staff of the school. Then comes the mood meter. What is that tool we call the mood meter? It's building an understanding of that. We also have a more advanced training that's online right now after this training that helps you take emotion concepts and infuse them into the curriculum. This is good old Uncle Marvin's work. So we help teachers through looking at child development from preschool all the way to middle school, the 12 emotion concepts that children should really understand by the time they get into high school. And then we provide guidance on how to infuse that using Understanding by Design framework to create units and lessons on how to embed that into existing content. What I mean by that, we're not going to write the new lesson for you on the science or the math or the language arts or whatever you're doing. What we're going to ask teachers to do is take these 12 concepts and map them onto their whole year. And then know that during the Holocaust time, we're going to talk about alienation. During Lewis and Clark, we're going to talk about this. And then the steps to the pedagogy are storytelling, becoming a good storyteller, sharing your story around when you felt that way, and getting all the kids to be comfortable doing the storytelling, making an explicit link to a character analysis or some kind of aspect of a poem that's in the curriculum. Having this teacher, the kids themselves become the teachers. We struggle with family connections and we struggle with getting parents into workshops. And in Ruler, we make the kids the teachers of their parents. So they actually go home and teach their parents the mood meter. They go home and teach their parents the words they're learning. And they have conversations at home about feelings. And then they come in and they work on strategies. So they think from a global and a specific perspective, using very culturally responsive vignettes. Again, what we do is we have them think, what's the issue around alienation that you're witnessing in your environment? Agree that that's one we're going to work on. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to think about ways that we can regulate it to increase that feeling of alienation. And then teachers are learning at the same time how to make this congruent to their teaching process. That emotions are actually inherent in the teaching process, and that different types of exercises, different types of even writing can be done better in different mood states. And you can just see here there are zillions of examples of classrooms throughout the United States. We even have our mood meter app. That this one is $1 to purchase if you're not a Ruler school, but once you become a Ruler school, it comes automatic in your package. And every teacher gets access to the online system to use it in their classroom. Let me ask you all to take a moment and read this quote. Anyone can relate to needing more space? So we have a tool we call the meta moment. And the meta moment is our tool to help people build greater space. I came at this tool because in Ruler, we were focusing on building positive climates and cultures through the charter work. We were building greater self-awareness through the mood meter, and even learning how to do everyday regulation of emotion. But I don't know about you, but I've got certain triggers as a teacher. Anyone here know what I mean by that? One of my triggers, for example, because of my modest roots, where I work, I'm triggered by entitlement. So it's one of those deep triggers for me. I have a lot of students who are coming from very wealthy backgrounds, and they never went to the grocery store. And Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I'm not really sure you know the answer. I just my gut thing is that I may not know the answer, but I'm going to grade your freaking paper. And that was a reference to my studies, remember? And it's like it drives me out of my mind, and the worst of me wants to come out. The worst of me. I'm like, Mark, remember, you're the director of the Center for And that's this piece right here. It's called Seeing Your Best Self. You need training on how to see your best self. It's hard. And guess what? Mark, the best self professor, is not the best self husband. My strategies at home are very different. Like in presentations like this, I like to use humor. At least I try to. When I use humor at home, it doesn't work. It works against me. Looks like you're in the red tonight, honey. Red? Yeah, I'll give you red. I'll give you red. So think about it, right? What works in different contexts doesn't work in other contexts. So schools have campaigns, and they do really hard work. For example, in some schools, when you walk into the school, there's a picture of every teacher, and it talks about, they show their best, my best self is a teacher who's kind, who's caring, who's compassionate, who is empathic, who is this, who is this. I'm striving to be more this in my role as a teacher or as a leader. The blueprint is our tool for complex problem solving, because I'll tell you, you can take that meta moment. I remember this one story. This one teacher goes, every time I look at my principal, I need to take a meta moment. I'm like, maybe you need a new job. But sometimes you take those meta moments and you're your best self, you can have it resolve the conflict. To give you an example of that, many years ago, I was giving a talk at Yale, at the business school. And the business school professors, I was younger at the time, and I wasn't tenured, and the whole baloney. And this one very big personality professor gave a talk after me, and he belittled me. Like, he publicly humiliated me, because he showed a video of a kid being bullied, and he goes, I just wanted to let you know that was Mark before he got his black belt. It was sick. And if I had it my way, I would have run on stage and done a spinning drop kick and knocked him out. Like, that's what I regressed to the point where I got so angry and I was so humiliated that I had to control my urge to literally run and do a flying kick and knock his head off. As you can see, I've got some aggression issues. But my point is, I took my meta moment. I'm like, Mark, you got bigger fish to fry. Like, do not allow this to have that power over you, even though I was dying inside. But I had to deal with it. Like, there was no way I could live with myself without dealing with this person and saying to this guy, because I would work with him again, and I could never imagine that happening again. Like, I just couldn't, for my own self-esteem, and for my own sense of being an assertive adult, and the work I do, I had to have the conversation. It was really hard, really hard. I had to map it out. I had to know what I was going to go in with, what I was going to say, what specific feelings I was going to have. I had to think about how he might feel. I had to work around his narcissistic big personality. And it took a lot of work. So you gotta get that, those skills are really important, because I'm telling you, they're not doing it well. We're just avoiding, or accommodating. At the high school level, beyond these anchors, we have an actual 80-module curriculum for high schools. Every year is a new piece of information to help students think about who they are, where they want to go in their academic lives, and what they need to get there. So for example, it's specifically tied to the high school experience of what is my academic life, what is my extracurricular life, what is my relationship life, what is my well-being life, what am I doing to support myself over time, and what are the underlying skills I need to learn across my development. Again, I say that because as a recipient of high school graduates, they just haven't learned these skills. So, a few final things. One, this is a phased model. I presented you like a lot of information today, and it could be overwhelming. The last thing I want it to be is overwhelming. What I want it to be is phased. So right now you're in kind of readiness planning phase. They're being trained. They're getting up to speed on these tools. They're going to learn how to use the platform to disseminate this work. Then the first year, we really highly recommend that you stick with the adults. We don't stop you from going to the kids because you can't control schools. I've tried that; it doesn't work. It's got to work for you. But we really highly recommend that you spend the real time helping the adults become more self-aware, build those emotion regulation strategies, learn about their triggers, take their meta moments, learn how to engage in that conflict resolution. And then your buy-in will go higher and your implementation will get better when you start doing it with the kids themselves. And then, I have schools now that have been doing this 10, 15 years. The innovations, I know, Keith, you went to the Willow School. I mean, you can just see the creativity that people, take with this. But you can't be creative with something you don't know, right? You've got to do the basics first, and then it becomes your own. Let me wrap up by saying a few things. One is that this work makes a difference. We're proud to say that we now know, it really has an impact on students and teachers and classrooms, and we're doing more and more research to show that. And a few kind of final points. One, hope today I convinced you that emotions matter. How many of you were on my bus? Yes? All right, cool. The second is that in order to be the role models, we've got to check in regularly, and monitor our own strategies. Like, what is your self-talk like right now? What is your self-talk like when you get home tonight? Try to be that emotion scientist and not that emotion judge. Emotional intelligence is a real set of skills. It's not a soft skill. It drives me out of my mind that people call this a soft skill. As I said already, it's probably harder than the soft skills to learn. It's harder than the hard skills to learn, I should say. I think there are really creative ways to do this work. We call Ruler an approach, not a program, because we want it to be able to be culturally responsive. We want it to be able to be integrated into every setting in a way that's meaningful to that setting. We don't tell you this is the strategy that you must use to regulate your feelings. We say, we know from research that people who have positive self-talk and use positive reappraisal are healthier. What is the self-talk for you in your context? What is the reappraisal that works for you in your setting? Here's the good news. No excuses. You can't say, it's too late, I'm already a 50-year-old adult male, female, whatever you are, and I don't, this is who I am. That's great. You can change. You can learn new words. You can learn new strategies. I can tell you from my own life experience, my father, who I did have a good relationship with in the end, when he got older, he started not regulating well again, had a lot of anger issues, and his wife actually called me. They were living in upstate New York, and she goes, Mark, I think I'm going to leave your father. I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't do that, because then he's going to want to live with me. And, again, cultural differences. Other cultures are like, come on in, Daddy. I'm like, uh-oh. Anyhow, I went up to visit my dad and his wife, and I took my dad out for coffee, and we just sat and we talked. And it was hard, because his wife was really upset, and lo and behold, what I learned from that situation was that he said he was angry. I can't take it anymore, because I have two brothers, and for some, we don't know where we came from or how we ended up this way, but all three of us are doctors. and independent, and we take care of ourselves, and blah, blah, blah. Her children, it's a second marriage, don't have the same situation. And so they need more help, and they need better jobs, and they need babysitting help, and the list goes on. And my father's wife wanted to do it. She has the right. She is their grandparent, and she wants to take care of her kids' kids. My father couldn't take it. He couldn't. He was annoyed by it, and it was da-da-da. Anyhow, in the coffee shop, sitting with my dad, I said, Dad, tell me more about what's going on. I can't take it anymore. She's doing this, and she's spending so much time with them. That sounds like a different feeling than anger to me. Anyone know what the feeling was? It was jealousy. I said, Dad, what I'm hearing is that you're jealous of her grandkids because they're getting a lot of attention from Jane. What do you mean I'm jealous? You're telling me I'm jealous? I'm like, no, you're telling me you're jealous, but that's I'm just the scientist developing the theme. And then he started crying, my father. He said, you mean I'm jealous of these kids because Jane's spending more time with them than me? I'm like, sounds like it. And then we said, what are we going to do about it? What's your strategy? So it was, and literally his wife called me about a month later. She said, I don't know what you did in that Panera, but it's different. So at any age, you can learn this stuff, as long as someone is willing to engage in the conversation and work with you. I promise you that. I'm going to fight until the end that you got to be systemic in your thinking around this work. The reason why, it's not only because of initiative fatigue, which is obviously omnipresent in our nation's schools. It's because it's a disservice to children's development to have teachers who are sick of new initiatives and trying another program, and that program doesn't work because it never really was a good program to begin with, and you're throwing this out, and you're doing this new one, every grade is a different one, and it's just so overwhelming. So start slow, right? Think about the principles of what I taught you today, and think about how do we slowly create those principles, create that common language in our schools, so that everyone knows, how they feel. Everyone has core strategies to deal with their feelings. It's just, from my perspective, a more sustainable approach, and one that makes teachers look forward to learning and doing, as opposed to a lesson, that's in this box that they fear is going to be the box of the past by next month. I'm on a mission, as it may be clear from my nonstop talking about this today. I have a project in Connecticut, just to let you know. It's called Making Connecticut the First Emotionally Intelligent State. And I have now 180 schools. I've got 40 superintendents coming to training in July. Because I want to show a statewide, that we have a common language across 160 districts. And I'm telling you, it's taking on. It's taking me a long time to get the commissioner. It's taking me some time to get the executive director of this superintendent's association, the head of this association, the state legislators and parents and funders. But I've got funders now supporting it, and I think we're going to make a difference. So on that note, I'm going to ask you all to take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. And if I could ask you now, as we wrap up together, what's the one word now that you would use? Let's make it even more interesting. It's 3 years from now, and all of the schools in your respective districts have taken this work really seriously. Common language is there. The adults are modeling the skills. The teachers, the parents are learning and modeling. The kids are learning and doing. It's in the community. What's one word that you would use to describe something that's different? What do you visualize? What do you notice in terms of your district, your school, child, anything?
Stability.
Stability. Thank you. Let's go around. Just one word. Anything.
Contentment.
Contentment.
Optimism.
Optimism. Accomplished.
Happy.
Happy.
Connectedness.
Connectedness.
Exciting.
Excited. Connected. Caring.
Cohesiveness.
Cohesiveness.
Compassionate.
Compassionate. Healthier.
Impact.
Impact. Engaged. Did we do this table? No.
Peaceful.
Empowered.
Growing.
Understanding.
Inspired.
Caring.
Empathy.
Growing.
Hopeful. Helpful. Wonderful. So, my bus stopped off in Willamette, and I opened the doors to all of you. I'm so eager and so excited that we have. I went in there. I was like, wait, there's another room over there of people doing this training. This is very exciting for me personally. It's our first time, at least, really working in schools in Oregon. Instead of Oregon, I was going to say Oregon, but I didn't do it. My hope is, Keith, thank you for being, I think, the primary person for getting us here. So thank you for that. And, we are the train and we get married quickly model. We're not the train and hope model. So we're in this with you. We want to support you. So please, there's coaching, for example, for every school that starts Ruler. Make sure your teachers and school principals use that coaching. Make sure they all get on the online community to use Ruler. There's a very robust system that we built to support with videos and tracking systems and tools and everything there that you can have access to. And I will, in the spirit of absolute shameless self-promotion, it has taken me about a decade to finish this book. I started writing it 7 years ago, and I just couldn't do it running the center. I decided last year to hire an executive director for the center so that I could actually think again, and I was able to complete it. This is basically Ruler on steroids. Someone said to me earlier, what about those 5 reasons why emotions matter? Well, there's a chapter on every one of those concepts. There's a chapter on every one of the Ruler skills, and then there are chapters in this book around how this work applies to homes, to schools, to workplaces, and to policies and communities. So it comes out very soon, and if you choose to read it, I would be delighted. And thank you. Since we're all leaders and you're not rushing, because you never rush, should we take about 3 minutes of questions? Just a few questions before we run out for lunch?
Absolutely.
Anybody have a thought that they want? Yes, please.
How are you and in how many instances are you working with teacher prep programs?
So we're just starting to do that. Actually, it's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, because it's designed actually for that. It's really like a primer for Ruler. Because the tools themselves, right? You have to be in a school with kids to kind of do the classroom content piece. But I do think we could be much more preventative, and about teaching the underlying principles and skills of this work in teacher prep. Leader prep is ahead of teacher prep, meaning in Connecticut anyway, and in New York. I've been doing principal academies in New York City for years on this work. Teacher prep is a little slower, but there's a lot of interest, thank goodness. The question is, what are we going to take out? Because you can't just keep putting more stuff in, and that's I think the dilemma right now. But seriously, I think it's important. Yes?
Do you have any sort of a parent guide or parent resource?
We do. So there are tons of resources for families. It's built into the online platform. We have multiple parent pillars, for lack of a better way. There are dozens of workshops that we've created for schools if they want to run them. We have what we call the Take 10s, which are morning drop-off little workshops on positive reappraisal or self-talk. Then we have the kids. I think the most exciting work is having the students be the teachers. So for every tool of emotional intelligence, there are 4 lessons per year, per grade, for students to go home and teach their parents a new way to think about the mood meter or the meta moment. And the problem is that I get parents calling us and my kid is asking me to be my best self. Yeah, exactly. Mom, if you were your best self, you would have used a better strategy today. So it's interesting. We got to, and then for every feeling word, there is a family lesson. So for 12 words per year, the kids are doing, and every word has its own fun lesson. So it might be doing a family experience around when we felt supported, or a song they create together on valued. Our families team has made it really creative that way. Yeah, yes.
Did you refer to the International Baccalaureate Learner Profile as a resource for kids? I
I'm
see a
familiar
lot
with
of
IB.
Yeah, a very similar, and I like your model better because it's more inclusive, but, yeah.
I mean, the IB is a very specific
Uh-huh.
model for, education, which I think is fine. We're really here focusing in on making sure every adult and kid in that environment has these emotion skills.
Which the IB kids can use.
Yes, because I completely agree. It's not, there's just, for example, we are fortunate, we just got a very significant grant from a foundation to create benchmarks. Because people don't know, like, they don't understand, like, what should my third grader be able to do with their feelings? What should my eighth grader be able to do? What should my high school be able to do? Like, what is the expectation from when I graduate from high school that, so we're actually gonna, with Ruler, we're embedding that in now. We'll release that in about a year, which will be very, but not accountable metrics. We want this to be more formative, right? To just help people see, where are my kids at, where are my students at, and how can I be better at supporting them so that they're building these skills in a cohesive, sequential way over time. Understanding that there's lots of room for flexibility. Any other questions? Yes?
Mark, I know you mentioned teachers and leaders, but you also say the adults in the environment. So what about the trust when we say educators, we mean everybody, like from the bus stop to the
Correct.
administrators. So, all your support, your IAs, your bus drivers, I mean.
They all get trained.
Awesome.
And one of my favorite examples is in Seattle. I got a call from the head of transportation saying he was installing mood meters in every bus. One of my favorite examples is actually another school in Seattle, one of the most diverse schools, actually, it's called South Shore. It's really just an amazing school, 57 languages in one school. The woman who is in charge of attendance made up her own program for Ruler. And what it was because they have a lot of kids who come in late. The kids are either being yelled at by their parents or they're flustered for whatever reason. You have to stop off the attendance booth. At the attendance booth, you plot yourself. And then after you plot yourself, you take a walk with the attendance person over to the emotion regulation strategy wall. And then you decide on a strategy that's going to best support you that you can practice to help you transition from the hallway to the classroom. So I go to visit this school, and the attendance lady, who's a lovely woman, she just does this with me. She's like, what do you think about what I've done with Ruler? I'm like, it's amazing. We're going to videotape it and show it to everybody. Because it's honestly an amazing innovation. Now here's the thing, they didn't do that day one, right? It happened over time. And so they have a little slip and she writes to the teacher, Johnny's here, and she uses different yellow, red, blue, and green slips. So the teacher now knows what students come into class, what mood they're in, but the kid is also given strategies. What a simple intervention, right? I mean, how easy is that? But yet, I'd never seen it before until this one school innovated and did it. And there's millions of examples of that kind of innovation and creativity. One of our schools just won this huge robotics tournament because they made it an emotionally intelligent mood meter robot. It's endless, really what you can do. Anything else? So, again, I want to reiterate, thank you for your time, your attention. It's here to work with you. Hope you're excited about this work. Please have realistic expectations for its implementation. Don't get frustrated after 1 week if people are still resistant. This is a multi-year project. My only hope is that you stick with it, because when people who stick with it get the results. And also, don't let the naysayers have power over you, because they love to have that power. And I have a feeling that you're going to get a lot more people on your bus than people who want to stand in front of the bus. So, Keith, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Well, I'll be here for lunch, and we can chat if you like, but I think that's awesome. So, Val?